As we return to our study in the Gospel of John, we are in chapter 21. This is verses 15, 16, and 17. A restoration. 3 times the Lord asked Peter if he loves him. 3 times Peter said he does. And 3 times the Lord told Peter to serve his people. You know, if we look at verses 15 through 24, with these 10 verses, the Gospel of John is complete. Only the Lord Jesus, Peter, and John appear in these last verses. Somehow, the other disciples have faded into the background and are not mentioned. 4 problems are dealt with in these last 10 verses. The problem of Peter's 3-fold denial, the problem of Peter's conviction that there's no need for the Lord or us to suffer, the problem of Peter wanting to compare his future with John's future, and lastly, the problem that a book written that so emphasizes witness might be written by a nameless author, and was the author even a witness of these things? Remember, Gospel of John heavily emphasizes witness. Well, who wrote this book? That's dealt with. These problems are dealt with in these last 10 verses of the Gospel of John. Chapter 21, verse 15. When, therefore, they had breakfasted, Jesus says to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me?" That's agapao. "Do you love me more than these?" He says to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." That's phileo. He says to him, "Tend my lambs." Well, there is a textual problem here. You may have noticed that I said son of Jonah, and most translations, I think, say son of John. Well, why do these translations say son of John? According to the CNTTS module in my Accordance computer program, only 6 manuscripts say son of John, and even those 6 are divided. 3 of them spell John this way, and 3 spell it this way. Son of Jonah, that's Iona, is the reading of the great majority of manuscripts, including the 5th century Alexandrinus, which is quite early. And by the way, a similar textual problem is found concerning the same expression in, John 1:42, John 21:16, and John 21:17. It's the same textual problem in these different places. My translation has Simon as son of Jonah. The use of the full name Simon Peter and Simon, son of Jonah, gives this conversation a solemn tone. In Matthew 26:33, Peter had asserted that his commitment was greater than the commitment of the other disciples. There, Peter said, "Even if all fall away on account of you, I never will." Now, the Lord Jesus asks if he still believes that his love is greater than theirs. Did the events that took place when the Lord Jesus was on trial bring into question Peter's love and commitment to the Lord Jesus? The Lord asked, "Do you love me more than these?" And 3 different commentaries or notes, commentaries, Michael's commentary, Borchert's commentary, and the Net Notes, they point out there's actually 3 different possibilities of, "Do you love me more than these?" There's 3 different possibilities for what that means. First one, "Do you love me more than that boat over there and all that fishing gear?" That's actually grammatically possible here. Also grammatically possible, "Do you love me more than you love these other disciples?" That's a possibility. But the much stronger, very strong, I think the real understanding is, "Do you love me more than these other disciples love me?" This third option seems better by far than the first or the second. "Do you love me more than these other disciples love me?" Remember how Peter said, "Even if everybody else falls away, I will never fall away." That does bring up the concept that Peter claimed to have greater commitment, have greater love for the Lord than the other disciples. I think that's one good reason for choosing, do you love me more than these other disciples love me? And we can also note here that that question, more than the others, more than these, the Lord only asks that question the first time he questions Peter. Interesting. So, Michaels notes that Peter did not say, yes, Lord, you know that I love you more than these. Peter didn't include that more than these that the Lord used. Now, does the omission of these words more than these indicate that Peter is learning some humility? Maybe. Because in front of others, Peter denied the Lord Jesus, in front of others, the Lord Jesus forgave him and restored him back into service. And we note that the only question the Lord asked Peter was whether he loved him. Morris Well comments that love is, Morris says, the basic qualification for Christian service. Other qualities may be desirable, but love is completely indispensable. And Morris, in that connection, mentions 1 Corinthians 13, 1, 2, and 3. Remember, verse 1 says, if I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but I do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. We can see that Peter here is given the task of tending the Lord's lambs. And then in the next two verses, shepherding the Lord's sheep and tending his sheep. Well, this is, of course, a metaphor. And we'll notice later that lambs are not used very often in this kind of a metaphor, but sheep are often a metaphor for the people of God. That seems to be its meaning here, too. Peter was there commissioned to shepherd, so to speak, the Lord's people. However, to shepherd, well, that's a metaphor. What does it mean? Beasley Murray explains that for Protestants, that metaphor obviously speaks of pastoring believers. But for Catholics, that metaphor obviously speaks of ruling over the church. Catholic scholars point to the Old Testament use of this metaphor, shepherding, in which, well, shepherding refers to ruling over, and they can point to 2 Samuel 5:2 to prove their point. There the Lord said to David, you will shepherd my people, and you will be as ruler over Israel. Well, there in the Old Testament, yes, to shepherd often meant to rule. But Beasley Murray goes on to point out that in the nearer context, in 1 Peter 5:1, Peter refers to himself as a fellow elder, and in the next verse, he commands local church elders to what? To shepherd the flock of God among you. Here too, in John 21, shepherding refers to pastoring and not ruling. Oh, in our previous video, the two words agapao and phileo are explained in some detail. In that video, you can see that despite what many will say, these two words are nearly 100% interchangeable. If you're interested in this question, do be sure to watch that video. We remember that when he initially called Peter and Andrew in Matthew 4:19, he said, come, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. Here he invites Peter to tend his lambs, or as we talked about just a moment ago, to pastor his people. The text does not explain about this shift from being a fisher of men to being a pastor of God's flocks. Chapter 21, verse 16. He says to him again, a second time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love, agapao, do you love me? He says to him, yes, Lord, you know that I phileo you. He says to him, shepherd my sheep. The repetition of questions and tasks adds to the solemn atmosphere of this conversation. The phrase more than these, we notice it's not repeated in this or in the following verse. Chapter 21, verse 17. He says to him, the third time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love, that's phileo, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you love, phileo, me? And he said to him, Lord, you know all things. You understand that I love, phileo love, I love you. Jesus says to him, tend my sheep. There are two possible interpretations here. Was Peter grieved because the question was repeated 3 times, according to Peter's triple denial? Or was Peter grieved because at first the Lord Jesus asked him a word that refers to a pure and high kind of love? That was in the first and the second questions. But in the third question, the Lord only uses a word that refers to mere brotherly love. Oh, by the way, the reader of the 1984 edition of the NIV can easily see where the verb agapao is used and where the verb phileo is used in this passage. The 1984 NIV translates phileo here as love, and in this passage it translates agapao as truly love. So when you're reading the NIV 1984, in this passage, watch for love versus truly love. And that's only in the 1984 version, not the 2011 version. Well, I'm pointing this out not because I think one verb means truly love and the other verb means just love, but so that you can easily see where the two words are used if you happen to own a 1984 NIV. Now, about these words. If agapao was a higher kind of love than phileo, then the second opinion mentioned earlier, that Peter was grieved because the Lord shifted down to a brotherly love when he was talking about a divine, a high love. That opinion could be true if phileo is indeed a lower kind of love than agapao. Again, the meaning of both these verbs is discussed in some detail in the previous video. As explained there is almost complete overlap in these two words. Just one example here. In the expression, the disciple that Jesus loved, that occurs in various forms 5 times in the Gospel of John. 4 of those times, the word for love is agapao, but once in chapter 20, verse 2, the word for love is phileo. The words in this context are nearly completely interchangeable. John was delighted to be called the disciple that Jesus had phileo love for. So Peter was not grieved because the Lord shifted down to a more earthly, lower class kind of love when he said phileo in the third question. No. Peter was grieved because the 3 questions about his love correspond with the 3 times Peter denied even knowing the Lord. So what's going on here? Well, actually, in this very passage, we can see something interesting about John's style of writing. John varies his vocabulary from one word to a near synonym with no shift in meaning. This very passage has 4 examples of that very thing. We just talked about the 2 words for love. Well, there's 2 words for sheep and lamb. Okay. And there's 2 words for to shepherd or to tend. And there's also 2 words for to know. Clearly, there are not 2 distinct meanings between the 2 words for to know or between the 2 words for to shepherd here. Likewise, there are not 2 distinct meanings between the 2 words for love. With Peter's 3 affirmative answers, he is restored to ministry. This 3-fold commissioning was given only to Peter because only Peter denied the Lord 3 times. There is no corresponding commission to the other disciples, not because Peter was commissioned to be their leader, but because they didn't deny the Lord 3 times. So by way of summary, 3 times the Lord asks Peter if he loves him. 3 times Peter says he does. And 3 times the Lord tells Peter to serve his people.